All right, so today we're gonna go over 5 woodshop upgrades that you can do for less than $100. And the best part, you can do it in a weekend. So let's get started. And to start, we're gonna make an extra large crosscut sled. And there's a ton of advantages to having an extra large crosscut sled. One being that you can cut wider material, but this also allows for longer cuts as well. So first I had to cut down my sheet goods. And I went with 27 by 48 for the base of the sled. And I'm using 3/4 inch Baltic birch plywood. So next we want to take our fence material and we want to rip it down into 3 different pieces. This will give us a front fence, a rear fence, and leave us enough room to cut full-length cabinets and stuff. So let's get to it. So here I'm ripping the fence pieces down to 3 inches in width. One side note, I did switch to 1/2 inch Baltic birch for the front fence just to lighten the sled and give me a little bit more space. All right, so next we're gonna apply some glue onto both sides of our pieces, and then I'm gonna use a brayer to spread that glue out. Then we're gonna throw them into the parallel clamps and clamp them up. And this front fence is a little bit shorter than the rear fence, just because it doesn't need to be all the way across. Again, trying to save myself some weight from having to move this thing around in the shop. So with the glue dry, I removed the clamps and put a 45-degree angle on the top corners of each fence. This is more for aesthetics and just so I don't nick myself on the corners. From there, I brought the fences over to the router table and put a 45-degree chamfer on the sides that I would be touching, as well as the side that faces the blade. Doing this prevents sawdust from clogging the fence and throwing off the workpiece as we're cutting. So I'm going to use white oak for the runners from the last project, and I'm going to make sure that I have the grain direction running vertically. This way it doesn't swell in the miter slot and get stuck and expand over time. But check your saw's miter slots for the dimensions, as these vary from saw to saw. Because this sled is so large, it won't fit against my fence, so I clamped a square to the edge so that I had something to reference against when attaching the runners. A few pennies flush the runners up against the top of the table. From there I applied some CA glue to the runners and some activator to the bottom of the sled. Then I could firmly press the two together for about 10 seconds. But if you're not in a rush, you could go for 20. Then I pre-drill and drive in a few 5/8 inch screws, about 5 for each runner. Next, I carefully raise the blade through the sled, taking care not to cut all the way through the rear of the board. I stuck an 1/8 inch piece of scrap into the slot and used the largest square I have to roughly square up the fence. This doesn't have to be perfect right now, we'll dial it in here in a minute. Next, I pre-drilled and drove 1 screw into each end of the fence. This will secure the fence while we do the fine adjustments. But prior to doing those adjustments, I fully attached the front fence. To dial the fence in, I used the 5-cut method. Now I'm not going to go over that in full detail here, but I'll link to the calculator down in the description. With my adjustments made, I could reattach the fence, drilling the screw into a new hole and redoing a test cut. And with a deviation of 3 thousandths over 44 inches, I called it good. Then I could apply a thin coat of paste wax at the bottom of the sled and the runners. And now I have a really large crosscut sled that's square and can handle some really large work pieces. Now, the next thing I wanted to work on was this vise. I got this vise on Amazon for I think like $70. I'll have the link in the description. But I just have a stick of pine in there right now, so I want to upgrade that with some scrap walnut that I have. So with the vise disassembled, I quickly milled down the walnut. Now I'm not aiming for a specific size here, but I'm trying to keep as much thickness as I can. And for the final width and length, I went with 20 by 6. But this size is just a personal choice, so as they say, pick a size that works for you. Or something like that. All right, so now that we have our wood square and milled down, I made a template for this vise, the Yoast vise. I'll have it linked in the description. But it matches up here perfectly. What you're gonna wanna do is cut it out and then use the bottom to reference where the bottom of the vise is going to go. Then you've got your 3 holes. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So after marking out my hole location, I used a 1-inch Forstner bit and a 3/4 inch Forstner bit to drill out the holes. Then I could test fit the vise and then mark out some matching angles for the vise bottom. Now these angles are more aesthetic than functional, and this matches the height on the side of my bench. I just matched them to the corresponding angle on the bottom of the vise. From there I sanded the block up to 220. Next I added a nice decorative chamfer at 45 degrees to the outside face of the block. Then I marked out the location for my fasteners and pre-drilled the holes. Then I used some black spray paint to cover up the blue and customize the vise. But obviously you can use whatever color you like. Then I cut out some cork and attach it to both sides of the vise. This will stop things from slipping around like Freddie Mercury said, under pressure. For the handle I cut down a 1-inch oak dowel and attached some rubber furniture feet for the ends. I used a hard wax oil for the finish, and then this vise was ready to use. Next I wanted to talk about some router bit storage. Going through these every time to find bits is a pain, so I've got some 1x6 over here that's left over from another project, and we're going to turn that into some router bit storage and screw and connect it to the workbench so that it's close by and easy proximity to grab. I started by cutting a clean square edge on the board, then taking it over to my new crosscut sled to square up the end. Then I cut the board down into 2 different sections that'll fit in the area on my bench. Then I ripped the board down into 2 1.5 inch sections and 2 1 3/8 inch sections. The 1.5 inch sticks will become our shelves. From there I dropped the blade to 1 3/8 and set the width to 1 1/4. Then I added a 45-degree bevel just to fancy up the shelves a bit. If everything is set up correctly, you should have 2 pieces that lock into one another, like a 30-second on the back. Then we'll drill some holes into the top. These will act like little trays to hold all of our router bits. And they'll lock into that channel, and we can drill some screws in to mount it to the table. After marking the bits 1 inch apart, I used a 1/4 inch Forstner bit and a 1/2 inch Forstner bit to plunge some holes. I like to label the back of these trays so I know where my bits go, and sometimes I add the item number as well so I know which one to order if I need to replace it. And then I could attach the shelves to my bench right next to the router. And now I've got some really nice router bit storage at a reasonable cost. So if you don't have one of the real fancy French cleat walls and you have something like this or a drywall, you can use something like these tracks to hang some of your tools from. There's a couple different connectors you can use with them, like cord holders, bike holders, and those types of things. I think this would be really great for hanging my miter gauge from. So first I level mounted the steel plate, then I covered it with the plastic and attached the hooks. So again, these aren't the perfect solution for everyone, but if you got them and you've used them before, you know they're super easy to do and they'll hold some of your tools. And if you want to see how I made this wall, go check out my Instagram. And as an added bonus, here's how I make the hangers for some of my tools on the wall. It's as simple as creating a small template out of plywood and screwing and attaching, which is great because I can hang tools wherever I want. All right, so as organized as I feel like the shop is, this drawer is always a mess. And I think that I finally found a solution for it. So let's get into that. So first I had to remove the drawer and then organize and clean out all the stuff inside. Then I could measure the drawer to cut out the solution for this problem, which is Kaizen foam, which I'll again link in the description. So once you have it cut to dimension, it just drops right in your drawer. And this stuff's great because it's two-tone, making it more apparent when tools are missing. So once you have your tools laid out, you can mark out each location with a felt tip pen and then cut them out with an X-Acto knife. Just be careful not to cut too deep and remove too much foam. I made a little mark on my X-Acto knife to let me know how deep to cut for each item. So now I have a home for all my tools. I don't have to worry about them rattling around in the drawer anymore. All right guys, so we did it. That's 5 shop upgrades you can do for less than $100. And for some of you, it may even cost less than that. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Leave me a comment if you have any questions. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next video. And watch this video next. I really appreciate your support, and I'll see you next time.